In today's video, we will talk about the progression of a problem gambler. So typically, uh, it's a downward spiraling for a problem gambler to hit the basement. So the basement here, what I mean is below rock bottom. It's not just a rock bottom because I don't think the gambler actually stops at rock bottom. Once uh, problem gambler hits the rock bottom, still will look for different options in order to raise the capital to recoup the losses. So the urge is very, very strong. Right. So basically, now what we're going to be talking about is how to identify at what stage of problem gambling you are in before it's too late. Okay. And what I have done is I have created a flow chart step by step to know exactly where you are. You might have started like long time back and you are still struggling with problem gambling. And it's a good way to identify exactly where you are at and how to fix things. So let's get started. So now it all starts with the first win. That's where the journey begins. In my case, my first win was I'm looking at my friend winning on a blackjack table. That was back in 1990, 96 in Atlantic City in the Taj Mahal Casino. So that's where the whole thing started. It's called the first win. So I observed the first win, and that's where I started reading the books about blackjack, and then the whole process started. So the trigger is the gambler places the initial bet and he wins. Or the trigger could be you saw the initial bet winning big. Okay, so it acts the same trigger. So the psychological status here is the excitement. You get excited about and you surprise reward reinforcement, and then you say, "Wow, I can actually win," or "I actually won." If you played the game, or if you are watching a game, you say, "Wow, you could actually win." Um, you might say that if you're playing, you'll say, "Maybe I'm good at it." But if you're looking at somebody playing, you say, "Well, maybe I could become good at it as well." Okay. So the typical behavior in this situation is, that what happens is that experience of gambling becomes memorable, and then the first win becomes a reference point associated with positive emotions, and you desire this thing to repeat. So, so the first win creates an emotional reward, and then the desire to repeat. That's where the whole thing gets started. So that's called the first win. And then you start the process. Once you start the process yourself, the second time, you will observe some small losses. That's the first setback, small losses. So, once the process starts, obviously you're not going to win. I mean, you're going to face some small losses, right? The trigger here is the gambler starts losing some of the money previously won. So, if you had the first win in this stage, you will be losing some of your capital that you want. So when you lose that small losses, you are in a denial stage. You say, well, those losses are fairly minimum. It's only a small loss. I'm still basically around where I started. So it's not a big deal. So it's called the denial stage. So you deny that these small losses actually is problematic. And then the typical behavior here, the gambler goes through is that the losses seem manageable. minimizes the impact, and he will continue playing. And then always he will remember the first win. Always the comparison is to the first win. The first win remains. It doesn't go away. It becomes memorable. All right. So, and then the third stage is, you go through a recovery mindset after those small losses. This is where the shift in objective begins. So what happens here is the triggers are, you will realize some winnings have disappeared, right? So this creates some kind of preoccupation on those winning that got disappeared, because you want them, you want them back at this stage. So stage number 3, after those small losses, you want to get back to your previous peak. You want to get back to your previous stage where you felt good, because your brain remembers how good you felt when you were sitting on the peak. And then after the small losses, you want to recover and go back to the peak. So you start saying, I want my money back. I need to recover it. I had spent so much time. I don't allow these small losses to occur. I'm going to get back to my previous win. This just becomes sort of a challenge at this stage to go back to the peak. So you don't accept any loss. So the typical behavior here in this stage is you gamble to recover though from those small losses. So you think about those losses and wins. And you plan for the next opportunity, how to do it, how to win. You strategize systems and process how to win back and recover those small losses. So you start focusing on strategies and systems, and then you continue gambling to recover and not to win. So basically, at this stage, it's a recovery mindset. So you are gambling to recover in this stage. Okay. And this stage can actually, can get longer, and it can take years, because those small losses can accumulate. It can never stop. It just goes up and down, up and down, up and down. It might take months and years, or it can take even less or more. However, so when you are in the process of recovery from the small losses, stage number 4, you might hit a big win. So a bigger win, so it might even take you much higher than the previous peak in this stage. This is a stage where basically the profit comes back up again. You are at, beyond your initial peak. And then the validation returns, and you are walking around with open chest, and you're saying, hey, I'm the shit, I'm the man, I can do it, I'm genius. And this is actually working. Again, you are into the self-validation stage. So once you reach the peak, you have small losses. Stage 3 is recovery mindset. Stage 4 is, you are sitting on a bigger win, and then you believe that you could actually make it again. So the trigger here is, it hits a significant win after losses. So basically, your win goes beyond, the first peak. This is what creates euphoria, relief, confirmation bias, and you say to yourself, "Hey, see, I knew I could get it back." Now, the typical behavior in this stage is that it confirms belief in self, forgets previous losses, and feels validated, encourages more risk. So basically, you encourage yourself to take higher risk at this stage. You'll see yourself taking a lot more higher risk because of self-confidence, and you forget about those small losses that occurred. This is where now you're going to take yourself to the next stage, which is the illusion of control. Now you are in a very big illusion of control stage. Again, this might take years. You might live in this illusion of control for years with a false confidence that builds up in you. The trigger here is familiarity with the game creates illusion of skill. So basically, you go into skill building and you think that you got skills, you want to sharpen your skills, then you're going to watch YouTube videos, you're going to read books, you're going to, further, seek more of a learning process from others, from multiple others to enhance and improve the skills. And actually, you believe that this is a legitimate source of making income. This illusion of control, basically, you're going to be spending a lot of time building your skills and systems in your favorite game. Okay, so the typical what do you call the psychological status here of illusion of control is, of course, overconfidence. You are now this stage is called overconfidence, and you perceive yourself as an expert, and you believe that you do understand the game and you have a system in place which you want to rely on. A typical behavior here is you believe in patterns and systems. And you feel in control, and you get to have selective memories and overestimate yourself in terms of ability. Stage number 6 is actually where you will start betting big. Now you will forget about going back to the betting small. You are thinking about how to bet big. It could be through some kind of compounding model. Something you say, well, I'm going to start with $1, then it's going to go to 10, then 100, then 1,000, then 100,000. So you're here, basically, you are dreaming about how to scale up your bet sizes. So you might, here in this stage, in the escalation stage, you might break your savings and your investments. You might sell your car, your house. You might, take a loan. You might take, you want to basically devote your time and effort towards escalation. So basically, this is again, it might take months and years in this phase of escalation. So you need to define yourself. Are you in the escalation phase right now? The typical triggers are you feel comfortable increasing the bet size, and you can't stop. Sometimes you just can't stop. Even if you convince yourself to bet small, you just can't help yourself, except that you will continue betting high. That's a trigger. And the psychological status is that your tolerance level becomes much higher. Okay. And then you convince yourself that you can afford a little bit more risk. And you convince yourself that this amount doesn't really move the needle. It's okay. It's just a small amount. There are other people betting, much bigger bet sizes. I need to be a high roller. I need to bet big. I need to make a lot more money. I need to become a millionaire from gambling. Okay, that's the mentality is running through your mind in this stage, in the escalation stage. The typical behavior in this stage is that your bets increase gradually. You need to watch out for that. And your new normal gets established. And you seek bigger excitement and much longer sessions into the game. Stage number 7, bigger losses. So after the escalation stage, then you start having much bigger losses. So you need to ask yourself, have you seen big losses? If you have seen big losses, then you are in stage number 7. This is where actually the spiral begins. And again, this might also can take years of bigger losses and spiraling effect. This is where basically you go much deeper into debt, much deeper into social issues, a problem with your spouse, family, children, focus, career, all starts here. The spiral begins. Okay, this is where your downturn begins in stage number 7. If the downturn begins, you must know that this is the stage you're in. Usually, the trigger here is large bidding cycles and produce significant losses constantly. So, your psychological status might indicate anxiety, frustration, and urgency. And then you constantly ask yourself, how do I get back my money back? So, this is where you are getting much deeper into the addiction, because addiction is defined by your psychological status of how do I get all my money back? And you just can't rest. You can't leave it alone. You want to get all your money back, and that's part of your addiction. The typical behavior is, the bets get larger and larger to recover, and more frequent gambling. You start gambling in the bathroom, in the car, outside on the streets, whenever you're talking to somebody, sitting in a coffee shop, and you disregard your family, your children, and everybody else. So basically you are less tolerance for stopping the gambling addiction in this case, and you constantly focus on deficit. Then basically after this spiraling effect, stage number 8 is chasing the big loss, the dangerous cycle. So basically now you're sitting in a much bigger loss. You will be now chasing much higher losses. So what I call is that after the bigger losses, stage number 7 is the rock bottom. And once you hit the rock bottom, you start chasing that much bigger loss. That's where the basement is. The basement is below the rock bottom. So chasing the bigger loss is the dangerous cycle. The trigger here, you attempt to recover losses through more and more and more gambling, because you just can't think of anything else, because you're thinking that there's nothing else that I can do except gambling. So I need to get back on my losses, and more gambling is the only way for me to get all my big losses back. Here, the compulsion, loss aversion. I can't stop here. It's just need one good session. You just start convincing yourself, and you are basically convinced that there is nothing else you can do in order to get back your losses except that you need to gamble more. Typical behavior is, you can't stop while behind. You set recovery targets, and you convince yourself to take more risk, more time. You basically go into much bigger loss. You chase, and you have more losses, and you chase, you get more losses, until you get into the ultimate loss. The ultimate loss is where the breaking point is, meaning that now the basement. So basically, I will define there is a rock bottom 1, and then there is a basement, and then there is a rock bottom 2, which is number 10. That's like, it's not there is nothing below rock bottom 2. Okay, so before that, there's an ultimate loss, the breaking point. Here, the trigger is a major loss beyond emotional and financial tolerance. That's it. So basically, here, you go into severe depression, and which you cannot tolerate. And there is nothing else you can do, because in this case, you have no cash in your bank, you have nothing left, and you just can't pay your bills. And so basically, there's nothing else you can do, and you cannot even get a job. You need to declare complete. You need to surrender yourself in this stage. You basically, this is where you go into a shock and disbelief and desperation, and then you ask yourself, how did this happen? So, and then you might reoccur a thinking process saying that, well, maybe I need one final opportunity before I give up. The typical behavior here is you'll try one last time. And then your desperation is for a comeback, rational thinking collapses, and high risk decisions. So here you might have something else, that you like tied up somewhere. You might say like, look, this is it. I need to break my final saving, or I need to break my investment or my retirement fund or something like that. Okay. So this is where you want to take whatever is available out there and you want to say, well, look, this is my final chance. So stage number 9, you are taking a final chance. Whatever is left, you want to basically use that towards chasing your ultimate loss. That's where then you go into the ultimatum, towards the end, which is called the rock bottom 2. Okay, now rock bottom 2, this is where you get into a different mode of life. That's it. This is where you will completely get out of the gambling addiction after hitting the rock bottom 2. Now, here the trigger is the consequences spill into everyday life. You will realize that your whole life is a mess, right? So, and then you're gonna feel the shame, the guilt, isolation, and loss of control. And you say like, well, I don't know how to get out of it. I need help. Here, basically, you will be aware that you need help, or you need to set a completely different financial goal to yourself and get out of this spiraling downturn in your life in your life due to gambling. Now, typical behavior is basically you will see that, and you are aware that you will have a financial problem. But, you will be hiding your debt and your borrowings, and relationship will start to crack, and there will be work issues and your emotional exhaustion. So now the basement is actually this is the basement number 2. After the rock bottom 2, you have a basement number 2, and here is basically gambling as escape, not a choice. The trigger is you gamble despite knowing it's making things worse. So once you go into the basement, okay, you will now basically start gambling in a informal way, despite knowing that it's making things worse. But you will continue in a very informal way in this case, right? So even though as a psychological status you're going to go into a hopelessness and exhaustion and emotional numbing, but the point is you will accept the fact that you are gambling in order to escape the reality. You know that. I mean, you will take it as a medicine in this case. So basically, you will be practicing gambling as a mechanism to escape the reality, and you know it. Even though you might won't be gambling a lot, but you will accept the fact that you will know the fact that gambling is made for escape from reality, and it's not really made for income, right? So basically, here the typical behavior would be you escape. Each time you have problems in your life, you will start escaping through gambling, and it's going to give you temporary relief. And but there will be more consequences if you don't manage the stage, and you're going to go into much deeper emotional pain. Okay, so it's a very tricky. So basically, now you have multiple stages here in the cycle of gambling addiction or problem gambling. So we talked about the first win, then small losses, recovery mindset, bigger win, illusion of control, escalation, bigger losses. After the bigger losses, then chasing the ultimate loss, and then rock bottom, and then the basement. Also, we talked about there is a rock bottom after, on stage number 7, and then you go into um, a basement there, where basically you are chasing the loss as a dangerous cycle, and then you go into the ultimate loss. That's rock bottom 2. After rock bottom 2, you go into the basement 2, and then you're gonna stay there in basement 2 for forever. Hopefully not. Okay, so if you don't cut off the cycle somewhere in the middle, or maybe step number 2, or just identify yourself exactly, by looking at this list, where are you exactly, and try to cut off from that stage before you drag yourself into further level down. Okay, you might be, let's say, facing small losses. In this case, you should know that these small losses, if you start chasing them, okay, if you start chasing them, it's unproductive. It's pointless. Why? Because even if you recover your small losses, and even if you have a bigger win, you just you won't be able to stop. You won't be able to de-escalate the bet size, and you won't be able to make consistent or sustainable income. It's just going to take you into much bigger losses through escalation. So there's no point of chasing the small loss in the first place, and there is no point of you know being happy or getting excited with bigger win, because even if you had a bigger win, you will end up losing it all and going deeper into the cycle of the ruin. So you might want to sacrifice this bigger win. Just sacrifice this bigger win. You don't want to think about it. Just accept the small losses and cut it off. So at this stage, you might want to basically go for smaller win, not chasing any small losses. Do not have recovery mindset. It's not about recovering mindset. It's all about just a fixed amount of small wins. Okay, I'm just gonna go to a casino, and if I win $30, $50, I'm okay. If I lose, I'm okay as well. So you don't start chasing small losses. Rather, you go in there and say, if I lose, I lose. If I win, I win. And my winning target is whatever, like even $10. I'll take that and go and leave. Okay, so it's not about building or stacking, you know, uh, chips. You go in there, small target, be humble, take whatever it is and get out. Have fun and get out. But developing a recovery mindset in order to chase your smaller losses, in order to reach back to your first peak, that's a problem. That's where basically, is going to get you in trouble. Okay, so you want to cut that loop right there. Or you might want to have, for instance, like let's say if you are in this stage where after a big win, you might be having an illusion of control, and you might be currently under the behavior of escalation of bet sizes. You might be here, stage number 6. So before you go into much bigger losses, I think you need to convince yourself that basically, hey, I want to get rid of my habit of escalating the bet sizes. Just reduce your bankroll and reduce your bet sizes deliberately, so that you don't go into much bigger losses and chasing losses, so that you can avoid going to the rock bottom. All right, guys. So this is how you should manage the to avoid spiraling downward effect towards rock bottom, or to avoid the progression of problem gambling. So I hope that this list going to benefit a lot of you to understand exactly what's going on with your style of the game, and not to get caught into problem gambling mode. We made a lot of video on the problem gambling at the inception stage of this channel back last year, so you can always go back to the initial videos that's available, talking about in detail about problem gambling. Is very, very helpful, very informative. It's for free. You can watch them. There are about over 100 videos on this topic. All right, guys. So basically, here we go. And I hope that this video is very informative and it's going to help you to reorganize yourself. And if you liked it, press the like button and subscribe to our channel. And I'll see you guys in our next video. Cheers.